You have been talking about this impending crash, and it hasn't come. And so will it come, or is this more scare tactic? And I'm not saying it's a scare tactic. It's, legitimately true that this doesn't make sense, but can they keep doing it?
Well, they've been doing it, right? They've been kicking the can down the road to delay the day of reckoning. So we would have had the crash sooner had the government not done that, had the Federal Reserve pursued a more responsible policy. We would have already had the crash that I was warning about. Now you're going to say, well, isn't it their job to prevent those crashes? Well, not if the prevention makes the inevitable crash even worse. That's not their job. Their job is to help delay a day of reckoning if all they do is succeed in making that day much worse, because we have a lot more to reckon with, because the only way they're able to delay it is by making the underlying problems worse, right? It's like an individual has a lot of debt, and instead of going bankrupt, they borrow more money. But now they have even bigger debt. So now it's an even bigger bankruptcy. But the fact that they were able to delay bankruptcy because they found another credit card that they haven't maxed out yet, that's not solving the problem. That's making the problem worse. And the question is, how much longer can they succeed in doing this? And given the enormity of the problem now that has been created as a result of their successfully postponing this day of reckoning, I just can't imagine that there's a lot more we could do before the whole crash happens. So, at this point, I would be surprised if we made it to the end, which is 2024, without the crash. And the crash starts in the dollar and then works its way throughout the rest of the economy.
I feel like we had this conversation 10 years ago when we were scratching our heads saying, wow, this is a lot of money that they're printing. This is trillions of dollars. Here we are 10 years later going, wow, this is a lot of money. This is trillions more. Are we 10 years from now, we're going to be saying, wow, how are they still doing this? I mean, at what point? That's it.
Well, so 10 years ago, they were doing $1 trillion deficits. They hit $1 trillion. Well, now we're doing like $4 trillion deficits. So if we continue to do that for another 10 years, we'd have to be running $16 trillion annual deficits. There is simply no possible way that it could ever get to that path. And the reality is the current trajectory is necessary to sustain this bubble. And so that's how you know that it has to pop along the way, because the numbers that would be required to sustain it grow so large that it is impossible. Like if you have a drug habit and you keep taking more and more drugs, and it's like, well, I keep building up a tolerance, so I need more drugs and more drugs and more drugs. Well, at some point, there is an amount of drugs that is lethal. And you'd have to say, well, I can't take that much because then you're going to die. And I think in order to stay on this trajectory, there is a lethal amount of debt that just kills the economy. And somewhere between where we are now, 4 trillion a year, and 16 trillion, we're going to hit that point. Mm-hmm. And, I would think it'd be closer to 4 trillion than 16 trillion.
Oh, okay. It's very sobering. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a whole lot of people addicted to this drug. It's become the new normal that, let's just do another package, $2 million, and create jobs. At least jobs could be created from the infrastructure bill, potentially, if that's what the bill is actually for.
People don't even want jobs anymore. They just want money. Why have a job when you could make more not working? Americans don't want jobs. Jobs are a means to an end. You want jobs because you need to pay your rent. You want a job because you need to put food on the table. You want a job because you need to, buy clothing and stuff like that. Well, if the government makes you a deal where, hey, you can sit back, you don't have to pay your rent, so you don't need rent money. We're going to send you money. You don't really need to go to work anymore. We're just going to give you what you used to earn. In fact, we'll give you more than you used to earn. Then that's a much better deal. So it's not, people don't want jobs from the government. They just want money from the government. And the government is giving it to them, and what are the politicians getting? Well, they're getting votes, right? If the government is giving you a lot of money, well, you're going to vote for the politicians who are making those gifts possible, and you'll vote against any politicians that threaten to take those gifts away.
Oh, okay. So, what is the solution? Is there a solution? What can individuals do?
Well, there are obviously solutions for that the government can do, but they're not going to do them because the problem that politicians are trying to solve is how do they get reelected? That's the only problem that matters to them. And you don't get reelected by taking stuff away from people. You get reelected by giving them more free stuff. So there are no political solutions that work for the politicians. So they're not going to happen. Right? And so we're going to have an economic disaster. But yeah, there are things that individuals can do to mitigate the damage to themselves, right? We can't alter the course of the crash for everybody else, but we can at least mitigate the damage personally to our own net worths, our own portfolios, by understanding what everything is going to look like at the other side of this and owning the right assets. You don't want to own a lot of paper. You don't want dollars. You don't want dollar-denominated bonds. You don't want a bunch of cash value in an insurance policy or an annuity. Money owed to you. If you win the lottery, you want the lump sum. Don't take the payout over 20 years because it probably won't have much value. So you got to get out of those claims to paper, and you got to, construct what I'm doing for clients. I'm buying foreign assets. I'm buying businesses through publicly traded stocks that pay very good dividends in countries that I think are going to come out of this on top, that are going to be the winners in this big transfer of purchasing power internationally from the U.S. abroad. I want to own resources and natural resources, commodities that are going to benefit from all the inflation, the money printing, the countries that have a lot of these resources in abundance, companies that are owning the resources and producing them, harvesting them, exploring for them. I like the emerging markets. I think the emerging consumers are going to come out of this way ahead. I think their currencies are going to go up, and they're going to start buying a lot more as Americans start buying a lot less. So you want to have a lot of exposure to the emerging markets, those economies, precious metals, mining stocks in particular are buying a lot there. And people who are buying real estate, if you get real estate in the suburbs, in the country, particularly if you can, have some land that you can farm,